This episode of Gather and Go is brought to you by Visit Atlantic City. Live to explore in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Atlantic City welcomes one and all to the seaside destination where local spirits are connected and the celebrations are unforgettable. Learn more at visitatlanticitycom. Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to Gather and Go, the podcast that helps you plan, promote, and lead better trips. I'm Brian Jewell. I am your host, and I am thrilled to have you listening today. And as always, our promise to you is that we're going to do everything we can to make this investment of your time worth your while. Now, today we're going to do that through a really interesting featured conversation with Gaurav Namit of Four Winds Tour and Travel. If you don't know Gaurav and Four Winds, well, they are some of the leaders in the student travel industry here in the United States. And Gaurav is going to talk to us about why the student tour market is thriving in 2025. He's going to share his thoughts on where today's student groups are actually traveling. And he's got lots of ideas about how you can attract student travel business. This is a fantastic conversation. You are going to want to hear it. First, though, let's start with some travel news you may have missed. Tourism Cares is launching a microfinancing fund for small tourism businesses. The nonprofit organization dedicated to advancing sustainability within the tourism industry announced this month that it is partnering with the Untours Foundation to launch the Meaningful Travel Fund. The fund is designed to provide affordable capital to small, purpose-driven tourism organizations around the world. The Meaningful Travel Fund will provide financing to organizations that focus on creating jobs in local communities, preserving cultural heritage, advancing environmental sustainability, and fostering meaningful connections between travelers and local communities. Tourism Cares and the Untours Foundation plan to raise money from other philanthropic organizations to capitalize the fund. They will also offer other resources and mentoring to organizations that receive the financing. Well, now it's time for the road tip section of our show. This is the part of every episode where we dig deep into our bag of travel knowledge from decades on the road and bring you tips to help make your next trip less stressful and more successful. Well, if you've been on many group trips, many group tours, you might know that every now and then it's hard to swing a sit-down meal at a restaurant, especially for lunch. Now, does that mean you just don't eat on that day? No, of course not. What it means is more likely than not, you're going to find a way to feed your people with some kind of meal on the go. And the most common example of that is a boxed lunch. Now, I've had lots of boxed lunches on the road in my time as a travel journalist. I've had enough experience with these lunches to realize that there are some things that every tour planner needs to think about if they are planning and providing a boxed lunch for their groups. So today in the road tip, I want to give you 4 quick things that you need to think about when planning and providing a boxed lunch for your tour group. So we'll jump in straight from the start with number 1. You need to think about drinks. And by this, I mean you need to provide more than just water. Now, don't get me wrong, water is great. Everybody needs water. Your travelers need to be drinking water. But sometimes with lunch, you want something a little bit more exciting than water, or at least I do. Now, when I eat, I crave carbonation. Maybe that's just me. Maybe you are an iced tea drinker. Maybe you're into lemonade. Whatever it is, a good drink can make that boxed lunch experience feel less Spartan than a bottle of water does. So let me encourage you to pack a cooler with some drinks, some soft drinks, plenty of diet drinks, maybe some lemonade, maybe some iced tea to give people some variety and make them feel less like they're making a sacrifice when they're eating this boxed lunch. Now, another thing you need to think about is the mess that goes along with boxed lunches, and specifically how people are going to clean that mess up. Now, eating on the go is always messy, definitely messier than eating in a restaurant. So you need to make sure that you are providing enough napkins or paper towels to allow people to cover their laps, cover their shirts, whatever they're wearing, make sure that they're not getting their clothes stained, and also to clean up any crumbs that might fall on the tray, any food residue that might be left on their fingers. Now, when you buy your boxed lunches, the deli or the caterer or the restaurant or vendor is probably going to provide those little napkin and plastic flatware sets all packaged up individually in plastic. Those are fine, but in my experience, those do not provide enough napkins to clean up, especially if the meal gets a little bit messy. So I recommend that if you are going to provide a boxed lunch, that you also make sure you have extra napkins or a couple rolls of paper towels that you can pass around to everybody, either in the picnic area where you're eating or on the motor coach if you're truly eating on the go. Here's a pro tip from an experienced dad. The best way to clean up from something like this is actually baby wipes. Yeah, you know those wet wipes that moms and dads carry around in their diaper bags. Well, a lot of parents keep carrying those around long after their kids are out of diapers because they're just so darn convenient and great at cleaning up messes. Grab a couple packs of those for the motor coach. They'll help you clean up the mess of the boxed lunch and maybe some other messes that happen along the way too. Regarding mess, you also want to think about extra trash bags so that people don't have to hold the trash at their seats after they finish their lunch. Now, chances are your bus driver has a trash bag somewhere on the coach that people have gotten used to using to throw away candy wrappers, water bottles, that sort of thing. But when you have a boxed lunch on the go, you need extra trash bags. So when lunch is over, you can make your way up and down the motor coach with those trash bags to allow people to get rid of that trash, have a little more room at their seats. And you can do this pretty easily if you have those extra trash bags on hand and have a plan for setting them aside or getting rid of them at your next stop. Finally, the last thing you need to think about when providing boxed lunches is food safety. Now, I am no expert in this area, but the experts tell me that any hot or cold food only has about 2 hours of safe, unrefrigerated or unheated time before it starts to grow mold, bacteria, things that could cause people on your trip to get sick. So if you are picking up the food you plan to have in your boxed lunch more than 2 hours before you plan to eat it, you have to have a plan for refrigeration. This means a cooler, this means ice, this means something that's going to keep that food at safe temperatures. Now, you may be thinking, Brian, I eat food all the time that has been left out more than 2 hours, and it's never a problem. I'm always okay. Well, you could be totally correct. It may not be a problem for you, but there's a chance that it could create a problem for someone else in your group. That is not a headache you want to take on. It's definitely not liability you want to take on. So when you think about that boxed lunch for your tour group, remember, you only have a 2-hour window from the time that food comes out of the refrigerator to the time your travelers eat it. If it's going to be more than 2 hours and you don't have a way to keep it cold until you serve it, you need to come up with another plan. That is your road tip of the week. Now, before we move on, I want to take a minute and share a little bit of news from us. Now, if you've been following us here at the Group Travel Leader for a while, you probably know that in addition to this podcast, we publish a number of print magazines and newsletters, websites, lots of helpful travel information. Now, if you plan travel for groups like banks or university alumni groups or chambers of commerce or any other kind of upscale affinity organization, I have a great resource to tell you about, and that is our magazine, Select Traveler. Now, this is a publication that you can read in print, you can read online, however you read it. You're going to find it offers a lot of ideas and intelligence to help you run more successful affinity trips. And when you look at one of the 4 issues that we publish every year, you're going to find feature stories on domestic and international travel destinations. There's going to be a section called Travel Toolbox where I deliver some of my latest ideas and tips and intelligence for you to plan really effective affinity trips. We're going to have some ideas about trip themes that you haven't thought of before, as well as some real life tips on managing an affinity travel program from a veteran travel planner. And of course, there is much more as well. Now, you can check this out and subscribe free at selecttraveler.com/start. I'm going to put that link in the show notes. If you're an affinity travel planner or even just interested in learning more about this high end of the group travel market, I encourage you to check it out. selecttraveler.com/start. Well, it's just about time for us to get into our featured conversation with Gaurav Namit. Before we do, though, let me remind you that you can find a recap of all the most important things Gaurav and I talked about in the show notes for this episode. Or you can find the most important parts of any episode of Gather and Go in the show notes for that episode. The show notes, of course, are accessible directly below the media player wherever you're listening to this podcast, or on our website at grouptravelleader.com/podcast. Now, I want to encourage you to listen all the way through the end of that interview and the quick wrap up I do at the end of that conversation, because after that, I'm going to take a minute and talk a little bit more about the topic of eating on the road, and specifically ask the question, is it time to rethink the group tour menu? That's going to be the topic of today's Hot Minute. You won't want to miss that. We'll be right back with Gaurav Namit. Atlantic City is ready to celebrate life's greatest moments with thrilling year-round events and attractions. With 24-hour gaming at 9 casino resorts and stellar entertainment throughout, Atlantic City is sure to provide iconic celebrations. Historic, wooden, and more than 5 miles long, the Atlantic City Boardwalk attracts visitors from all around the world as they create their own waterfront memories. You can stroll the wooden way by foot, on a bicycle, or via the legendary rolling chair. Bask in the glowing sun, take a dip in the Atlantic Ocean, or stroll along the white sandy beaches to find the perfect seashell. At the famous and free beaches of Atlantic City, adventure is on the horizon. Known for its thriving culinary scene, Atlantic City welcomes all to explore its famous dining establishments. From celebrity chef hotspots to locally owned eateries, Atlantic City's restaurants are well equipped to accommodate special events for large or small groups, served in unique spaces. Start planning your Atlantic City trip at visitatlanticcity.com. All right, everybody. My guest today is a student tour operator who left a career in electrical engineering to join his family's company, Four Winds Tours and Travel, which takes more than 20,000 students on music and education tours in the U.S. and abroad every year. He's also on the board of the Student and Youth Travel Association, where he works closely with researchers to produce the Business Barometer and track industry trends. Gaurav Namit, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Brian. Happy to be here.
I'm so glad to have you here. I hear almost every month these days about how important student and youth travel is to our industry. There seems to be some buzz about it everywhere I go. People are asking about it. I'm meeting tour operators who are, interested in maybe dipping their foot in that pool. So I'm really glad to have you here today because you have a long career, a long family history in student travel, and we're going to unpack a lot of the trends and the experiences and stuff like that. But before we do, I want to know, number one, how your family got into the travel business, and then what made you decide to join them after trying your hand at some other things.
My mom always gets embarrassed when I tell this story, but basically when my mom was much, much, much younger, she was a special education teacher in India for second graders. And then after that, she started a career for a little while as a travel agent, basically issuing tickets back when issuing tickets was, a lot more arduous than it is today.
Right.
And then, her and my dad got married. They'd moved to the States. My dad was already based here. My mom moved over, and my mom didn't work for a while. And I think I was kind of a bratty kid. And I think I was like 10 or 11 one day. My mom told me to do a chore. And, as a bratty kid would, I told my mom to do it. And she said, "Why should I do it?" I'm like, "Well, you don't work. So like, what else do you have to do all day?" And on that day, my mom, I kind of regret saying that now because my mom's really stuck to it over the last 30 years. But she basically said, "I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to go out and get a job." And so then she did. She worked at some temp jobs around Long Island, where we were living at the time, where I grew up. And she didn't really like it, and she didn't really know what to do. And she went on a trip to Mexico with her cousin, my aunt, who was running a luxury travel agency into India, and just talked about ideas. And, the idea that like my mom's always loved kids, she's always loved education, she's always loved travel. Why doesn't she combine them? So she did. And Four Winds was started. The name kind of comes from the four cardinal directions. There's like four directions on a compass. So we will take you anywhere the winds can blow you. And then the story about me is, I was exposed to travel a lot as a kid from my parents. Growing up in India, the way they did, travel was always this luxury dream. It's like all they could ever imagine. Like, how great would it be to one day go see the world? And when they got the means, it's all they could ever do, And so I was exposed to it a lot as a kid. My background, as you said, was in electrical engineering. I used to do semiconductor design. And, the other part of the company really started a lot around music. I played a lot of music as a kid in middle school, high school programs, even in college. And Four Winds did a lot of music trips, band trips, marching bands, jazz bands, orchestras, choirs. And in a lot of ways, the music and travel have been such an integral part of my life that it makes sense that I fell in here. Practically, I didn't really see that as a future path when I was younger. I think my parents didn't necessarily even want that for me. They wanted me to sort of continue to carve. I think I had much more passion for academia and solving problems. And, it was 10 years ago, 11 years ago now. I was in between companies, and mom was getting older, as moms do. And she didn't really know what she would do with it. And I think this happens a lot for small businesses in general, in any trade. The travel industry, I think, is littered with so many small businesses. We probably see a lot more of it than maybe some others. But so I thought, like, okay, I'm not in a job right now. I am going to, let's see what it looks like to do something with it. And I came in, and then it was going pretty well, and then COVID really shook things up. So. And that was a time where there was a lot of searching for me if this was the right path, like really looking forward, because getting through COVID was one thing, but then rebuilding from COVID has been its own journey. And I did have a lot of time to think, as I think a lot of us in the industry did. And I found, like I said, there's a lot of intersections to this industry that fit a lot of things I'm very passionate about: education, music, travel. And there was a lot of ways that this was going to go forward, and being able to be part of shaping that in our small piece, it felt like a journey I wanted to take and see where it would go. And that's sort of how we got here.
Yeah. So student travel is important. Can you help us wrap our minds around how important, or why it's so important, and maybe, why there's a growing attention on this part of our ecosystem?
Student travel is important. I'd argue it's the most important. I think student travel serves a lot of different functions for the travel industry, and for other industries. I think educationally, there's a ton of work and research that's gone out there to talk about how study abroad programs have impacted youth's careers, the impact of travel on lower income students, the impact of travel on communities that are marginalized, the impact on diverse communities less diverse communities to see diversity. I think that educationally we provide such an impetus for so many different segments that adds to the travel component, which is on top of the programmatic or the educational component. And this doesn't even get into sports and other types of other angles of travel. I think the industry has shifted a lot. I think attention to student travel 50 years ago was looked at as a massive luxury, but I think travel was also looked at as a massive luxury.
Yeah.
And as that price has become more affordable, as travel has become more normalized, student travel has become more critical. I think one of the things about the student travel industry, one of the reasons I prefer our space to the larger travel industry has always been, in a sense, we're a little bit more recession proof because we're not a luxury item.
Mm.
Um, a lot of our trips are not necessarily at the same price point as luxury travelers, but our trips are things that families feel a lot more dedicated to fundraising for, things that schools set budgets for, things that governments set aside funding for, there's grants for. What that means is, regardless of how you may not want to do the $10,000 safari trip with your family this summer, but if your kid's got a DC trip, that feels a lot more affordable and a lot more integral, not just to his travel experience, but his educational experience. So I think these avenues have sort of created a way that the student travel industry is getting more visibility. Coming into and out of COVID, I mean, 2020 trend-wise was looking like the largest student travel year in history.
Mm.
Obviously, it wasn't.
Right.
But I think our recovery also shows the resiliency of our industry, right? Although we did suffer a lot, especially in 2021, when maybe other segments of travel found ways to pick up and people were still traveling, despite restrictions or within the bounds of restrictions allowed for certain amounts of travel. Student travel was a lot more limited, right? Like, I can say it's okay for me and my family to get a COVID test, but I can't require 100 students to get 6 COVID tests to go on a trip.
Right.
And even into 2023 and 24, 23 and 24 were both years that basically showed us continue that trend and reach and beat in some segments 2019 numbers. And I think everyone in the travel industry is going to be continue talking about 2019 numbers for a while. I know there's a little bit of exhaustion in that, but it's still important to sort of see what it looks like.
So at the risk of jinxing anything, do you have a sense industry-wide, or you could even speak just for your company, what you're expecting in 25 and 26? Do you think that growth continues? Is there some plateau coming up? Are there external factors that could influence that growth trajectory?
Absolutely. So 24, everyone felt like domestic or local travel was kind of at a satiation point. It felt like we were kind of sit there, but international travel was going to grow significantly. That recovery has still not hit those past numbers. And I think part of that's also the rules and restrictions around international travel, whether they were legal rules or federal rules or other countries' rules or just school rules, were not lifted at the same pace, right? It was a lot more comfortable to say, hey, it's okay to go down to DC, but getting on a plane and going to France, I don't know what's going to happen. We don't have the time to review that legally from an administrative point of view. Let's just say no.
Yeah.
I think that was an expectation. I do think 25 from our end, and I think from what I'm hearing, industry and our research should be out in another month or two. We have the data is in the process of being crunched as the numbers people do it. But I think that 25 is feeling a little bit flat to 24, which I think industry-wide we are all pretty comfortable with because everyone had such a great year, 24. 26 is feeling a lot more appealing. Now, from the student perspective, I think that's a little bit different than maybe industry-wide because that's driven by the high school cycle, especially in North America. So in 26, the seniors are going to be students that were freshmen in 2022, which means that's the year when a lot more students were back in school. So that idea and that appetite for travel was a conversation piece that started at freshman year, and now it's sort of culminating. Versus this year, we have a lot of kids that did a lot of school on Zoom and maybe didn't develop that same appetite for it. I think in terms of industry risks, look, we run into the same risks that we always have. Currency fluctuations. What does that mean? Flight costs. What do political setups mean between countries for how many flights are running there? How safe will it be? What warnings are we going to get from the State Department about certain countries? That's always going to be something that we look at. Along with, not COVID necessarily, but all sorts of diseases, right? Like the CDC advises on regions all the time. Does that mean that region is going to take a hit on travel? When Zika came out, we had hits in those regions. Travel's seen, COVID's the one that everyone in the world felt. We feel every single one, right? Yeah. And then economically, right? I think, like I said, the resiliency of the industry is that we will travel, not necessarily a resiliency on price, right? I think there's been a
Yeah.
lot more pushback in 25 on pricing than we saw in 22, 23, and 24. And I think some of that was there was this burning need to travel no matter the cost. And there was an understanding that travel is getting expensive and that's okay. Whereas now I think that there's been a lot more pushback like, do we want to spend that much money on a trip? What else, what other costs are coming? Um, and I think there's just an adjustment. We've always been a very price sensitive industry. And I think it's just a back to norm in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So that price sensitivity is one of those distinguishing characteristics that is probably unique to student travel in a way that doesn't apply as much to, the senior adult groups or other, kind of general market group travel. I'm curious if there are some other really key differences between what your colleagues who run adult tour companies do in their operations or their sales or things like that, and what you do with students and serving their families and schools and so forth.
I could go on about this. So I think there's a couple of big things I think to think about, which are the types of activities sometimes have to be shifted. The other thing is how many activities are you doing in a day and how filled are your days? I think when you have adult groups, you kind of have a little bit more luxury with being able to play with, you have some free time to explore the city, right? Um, that's a lot less allowed. We prefer a lot more structured time. You want to keep the kids busy. You want to keep them out of trouble, right?
Yeah.
And you want to tire them out. We don't
Right.
want kids. We don't want kids at the end of the night who did nothing all day and now have this burst of energy at 10 o'clock at night and want to run amok in a hotel.
Right.
Other things, like the types of hotels we use. Interior corridors, right? Big thing. Every student travel company I talk to, anywhere in the world, the corridors are like a conversation piece for us, right? And so many hotels we've talked to that said, we have exterior corridors, but we have security guards, we have cameras. And given the option, every school would still prefer interior corridors. It's easier to chaperone, it's easier to monitor. It's just the default thought process. Another big thing is food. I think food is something that maybe adult travelers prioritize a little bit more on their trips. And we have a mix, right? I have student groups that are culinary focused. We're doing cooking classes. They really want to get into local meals. And we have student groups that we want to eat, so they're fed and we want to get them on the road doing stuff, But I think really understanding that. I think the programmatic aspect of our trips also can be pretty different. I think there are themed trips that you do a lot with adult tours, but not necessarily tied to a year-long curriculum, right? Maybe I'm going to explore the churches in Italy, right? And I want to see them and I want to see the history and I want to learn about it while I'm there. But our trips are often supplemented with classroom work that's done beforehand, right? So they're not just walking in to be taught there, they're being taught and led by those teachers. The last part I want to touch on this is when we're doing groups, a lot of times it's a teacher-led or school-led trip, which means that's our main point of contact. And in a lot of ways, that's our decision maker in terms of the content of the trip and a lot of the rules around what can and can't be done. When you're doing adult tours, a lot of times you're putting everybody, you are that leader, right? You are saying, this is what the trip is. This is with expectations from everybody. We're kind of acquiescing that responsibility, saying, hey, we follow what your school guidelines are, right? Like if your school says no water activities are allowed, no water activities are allowed, right? That I think is a pretty big difference in terms of the sales process. In a way, we kind of have a B2B feel versus a B2C feel. It's got pluses and minuses, right? Like I don't have 100 kids on my trip calling me saying, can I adjust this for my one room?
Right.
Downside, I have one person and then all those people may still send me emails complaining and I still have to go back to that one person to figure out how to communicate.
Yeah, that's tricky. So if I were to go on some game show like Family Feud and they asked, Brian, can you name the top 5 student travel destinations in North America? I feel like I know what I would guess. I think there's a perception among a lot of people in travel that, there's a handful, there's 5, 10, whatever destinations that all the student groups go to. And if you're not in those top 5, top 10, you don't have much of a chance of getting that group business. Would I be badly mistaken to hold that belief?
You would. And I think it's important to know that we like adult tours have our top destinations, right? And I think that's asking that to not be the case it's not a move that makes sense. DC is a destination that's always going to be in the top 3 of destinations that we take student groups to. DC is a major, US history is a major portion of curriculum, right? And that exposure to DC at that age, I think, is important. And there's a new batch of them every year, right? And a new batch of them that have never been to DC. So we have to take them to DC. That being said, the second-tier cities, the secondary markets, they're all growing, I think, both in the adult travel space as well as in the student travel space. That comes from a lot of different factors. One, an uptick in maybe the number of trips that students are going on, whereas, 30 years ago, maybe you went on 2 trips in your entire student career, right? You went on an 8th grade DC trip and you went on a senior trip or a music trip or a foreign language trip, and that was it. And now we're seeing this plugged in a lot more. We see grade-wise trips starting from 7th grade all the way up. Every year, there's a destination that they take the entire student body to. So now you have a lot more trips to work with, which means a lot more destinations to start thinking about. Also, a big part of student travel is music and college campuses, right? And those exist everywhere, right? So music festivals, music competitions, performing. We did a southern tour of the US last year to awesome places. We were in Asheville, North Carolina. We were outside, we were in Knoxville, Tennessee, along with Nashville. We were hitting all these other cities. And the music director was like, look, I have an inner city school in Philadelphia. These kids need to know what music is like across the country, right? And music is something that we can agree is created across the country in lots of different ways. There's challenges with running trips like that, but there's huge advantages. And if you find the schools that are willing to explore different destinations, I think the rewards are immeasurable.
So if I were a destination executive, in charge of trying to drive more traffic to my hometown, what are some things that I should do to make myself more attractive to the student group market? Is it new product I have to develop, or are there ways that I can just leverage my existing product and, build relationships with people like you and start that process without, having to spend millions and millions of dollars trying to, bring new attractions to town?
I don't think you don't need to do that. I think a lot of the things we run into when thinking about new destinations that aren't necessarily used to hosting student groups is student groups tend to be on the larger side. What that means is we need a place to feed them, right? Hotel properties that have enough rooms to fit all the kids, breakfast rooms that have enough space so that we can get breakfasts, restaurants that can fit 50, 100, 150 kids, when you go into some of these smaller cities, they're just not equipped for that. Or the destinations that they do have equipped for that are just priced too high, right? I know the price sensitivity of student groups is something that I feel like people that don't work with us get very turned off by. But the thing you have to remember about us is we bring volume and we don't need you to discount everything. We need you to work with us to create something that works both in your price range and our price range, right? If you sell dinners at $50 a head and I have a $35 budget for dinner, what can we do to the menu, right? Like I'm gonna fill up 100 seats. Let's create a custom menu. Work with me on that. Your ticket entrance price is $120. I'm gonna bring 200 kids there, right? I only have $80 budgeted for it, but maybe we limit the time that they're there. Maybe work with us. Maybe there's certain days where you can do that where you're slower, right? Just give us a window where these are the student travel days. Give us youth prices on those days. Those are big things. I mean, I think in terms of attractions, look, your city is beautiful. I think that of almost every place I go. I say almost because I'm sure there's one that I'm forgetting where I had a really bad experience, but your city is beautiful. Your culture is beautiful. We're there to experience that. We're not trying to say, hey, we're here now, come cater what we see back home, right? We want to see what your city is. And maybe that is, you guys don't do hotels larger than 10 rooms and we need to work around that. We're willing, student groups, students are very flexible. I know it's a long time ago for you and me, Brian, but
Right.
it's easy to get kids to work with something as long as it's communicated, right? As long as there's like, okay, we're camping or we're going to be split across 4 properties. We need to chaperone for that. That's fine. We need to budget for it. We need to think about who we're bringing in, how to separate those kids. But it's all doable. It's just a matter of wanting that kind of flow of business. And then it's just about selling the city the same way you'd sell it to anybody else, right? Like you're coming here for X, right?
Yeah. Now, you've told me before that there's been quite significant growth in the past few years in the number of companies that are offering student trips. I'm curious why you think that is, what's driving that growth, and if you think there is still some margin, if there's still opportunities for new travel entrepreneurs to say, hey, I can make my way in this segment and make a real go of it.
So I think what is interesting about schools is that maybe is a little bit distant from leisure travel, is that they are community, right? A school is a center of a community. That's where your children go and get educated. That's where they make friends. Those parents are your friends.
Yeah.
What that means is when they make decisions, it's not just about what is best for them. It's what works for their community.
Mm.
And one of the reasons I think so many student tour operators have picked up over the last 20, 25 years is as each of those communities start to build more and more robust travel programs, they want to work with someone within their community. And if not someone within their community, somebody who understands their community.
Yeah.
I touched on this a little bit earlier, but the student travel industry is a wild range of different things. Sports travel is something I do very little of, but it's a huge segment. Study abroad programs for colleges, huge segment. We don't really do it, but lots of other companies do. Gap year programs, another thing that is a place where student travel is very focused, but it's its own segment. So I think this combination of finding that segment that you connect with and the localization around the communities that you connect with. It doesn't necessarily need to be where you are physically, but a community that you really connect with their mission and how to empower that mission. I think it means that there's always going to be room in the space for up and coming people to focus on that. Programming keeps changing. Right now, sustainable travel has been a big trend, I think, in the student travel space, which leads to the leisure travel space. I think service travel is not what it used to be, but 30 years ago, that was a big trend, right? So those trends keep coming and attaching to communities that have different missions as new and important, new ways of travel and new ways to focus on different parts and segments of travel. There'll be space for plenty of people, but no one should join because that's more competition for me and I don't want it. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, absolutely. Now that makes a lot of sense. So what is the best way for people to connect with you, learn more about you, or say, follow some of the research work you're doing for SIDA?
Connect with SIDA. SIDA is a great organization. We have been doing this business barometer for a while now. We're also launching our student digest, which is going to be, we run that study about every 10 years, give or take. The business barometer is very focused on trade industry. So we tour operator companies, suppliers, and getting information about what they see. The student digest is a much larger survey. We send out to parents, teachers, former students, administrators that get a much more in-depth perspective from their end about travel. It also touches to one thing I didn't mention here is, about half the student travel industry in terms of money spent is directly with schools. They don't go through tour operators at all. It's another reason why there's so much opportunity because, can you price competitively against that? Or can you provide a service that makes sense for them to use you versus doing it on their own? And at ways to reach me, I don't know, just email me. I'm always around chat.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. We will link to those resources in the show notes, and I'm sure people will take you up on that. So before I let you go, we have some questions we ask everybody, and these are just for fun. So no pressure. Just answer off the top of your head. When you book travel for you, are you going to choose a window seat or an aisle seat?
Depends on the length of the flight. Generally window.
Is a window better on a longer trip or better on a shorter trip?
Longer. shorter, I want to get out as quickly as possible. Longer, I can lean on the edge. Also, I'm a kid at the airport, and I get excited looking at planes. I get excited looking out the window. Like,
Yeah.
it's still magical to me.
It sure is. Yeah, I love that too. So what's one thing in your carry-on that you wouldn't travel without?
I try to travel light, but I also try not to have too much. I think one of the things I love about travel is that if I'm getting on a plane, I'm getting off in a place where there are Cubans living there. So whatever I need to live, there'll be a way to get something. So I don't worry about it too much. But the passport's annoying when it's not there.
To say the least, right? For sure. That makes sense. Okay, so if you had a free airline pass and a week with nothing else to do, where would you be headed next?
I haven't been back to Japan in a while. I really want to go there, but I'm thinking, well, see, this is tricky because the airline pass may get me there, but the cost of doing things there is not covered, right? My mom's been dying to go gorilla trekking, and so I really want to take her to Rwanda soon and go gorilla trekking with her.
Yeah.
But the airline pass wouldn't cover the cost, so I don't know if that's
You know what? We can throw in a couple $1,000 spending money as long as I'm just making up reality, right?
Yeah, that would probably be the first one I'd want to get to.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm hearing so many people right now talk about Japan and wanting to go to Japan, and I haven't been either. So I would take that opportunity myself. Last question. What is one thing you have seen or done on the road that you wish you could go back and experience again with somebody you love?
Oh man, so many things. Probably the top of Kilimanjaro. The journey is arduous, but I think the summit, like the peak of summiting Kilimanjaro, was quite incredible. The way the sun rises over the horizon and just being on a glacier in the middle of Africa, and just so much has been written about that mountain, and so many different cultures have touched it, and it's touched. I think that's probably one I would love to do again. Maybe without all the work, the 6 days of climbing it takes to get there, but yeah.
Yeah. What an amazing experience. I'm envious of that for sure. Gaurav, thanks for spending some time with us today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I sure hope you enjoyed that conversation with Gaurav as much as I did. And if you enjoyed it, I've got good news for you. There is bonus content from that conversation that I did not have time to fit into this podcast, but you can hear everything Gaurav had to say when you watch this interview on our YouTube channel or in the video clip on the episode page for this episode. Now, when you watch the video, you will hear Gaurav and I discuss how his mom almost quit before she started her very successful tour company. He's going to discuss the growing trend of college visit tours, which I find just fascinating. And he's going to give his insights on where students are going internationally. Now, you can find all that content on our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search Gather and Go, or simply watch the interview embedded on the episode page for this episode of the podcast. Now, I want to take a minute and recap a few of the most important things Gaurav said to make sure you don't miss them. When we were talking about the importance of student travel, Gaurav said, I think student travel serves a lot of different functions for the travel industry and other industries. Educationally, there's a ton of work and research out there showing how study abroad programs have affected youth's careers, the impact of travel on low-income students, the impact of travel on communities that are marginalized, the impact on less diverse communities to see diversity. We provide such an impetus for so many different segments. I resonate with this so much because I am one of those people whose life was changed by travel I did as a student. I remember the 8th grade trip to Washington, D.C. I remember opportunities I had in high school to go to Central America. I remember opportunities to travel and study abroad in college. Those things made me who I am. I would not have the career I have today in tourism without those experiences. And so I'm a big believer in the importance of student travel to create those opportunities for future leaders as well. And so even if you are not invested in student travel in a professional capacity, I hope you will be invested in it as a stakeholder and a cheerleader for the future of our industry and the future of our communities. Now, when I asked Garv where student groups are traveling these days, he said, DC is always going to be in the top 3 of places we take student groups to. That being said, the second-tier cities and secondary markets are all growing. That comes from a lot of different factors. An uptick in the number of trips students are going on. And he went on to say, 30 years ago, you went on 2 trips in your student career. Now we're seeing a lot more. We see grade-wise trips from 7th grade all the way up. So there are a lot more trips, which means you need a lot more destinations to take groups to. Now, I think this is great news for anybody who is a destination professional. You may have come into the industry thinking that if you were not DC or Orlando or New York or one of a small handful of popular group destinations, that there really wasn't much point in pursuing the student group business. But that couldn't be further from the truth. And if Garv is right, the growth in popularity of every single year kind of trips for these student groups means that schools are looking for more and more great places to take their travelers. And if you are within a convenient driving distance of that school, you might be able to capture their business as a student tour destination, even if you're not one of the big 5 in the US. And finally, when I asked Garv about what it takes to attract student groups to a destination, he said student groups tend to be on the larger side. That means you need a place to feed them. Hotel properties that have enough rooms to fit all the kids, breakfast rooms that have enough space, restaurants that can fit 50, 100, 150 kids. In some smaller cities, they're just not equipped for that, or they're just priced too high. He said price sensitivity of student groups is something people get very turned off by. But you have to remember, we bring volume. We don't need you to discount everything. We need you to work with us to create something that works in your price range and in our price range. Now, I love this thought, and Garv is right. Students often travel in numbers that traditional senior adult groups do not, especially as the traditional market tends to veer towards smaller groups now. Well, that is not the case with student groups. In fact, I talked to another student tour operator just the other day who told me it's not uncommon at all for her to travel with multiple motor coaches full of passengers. So this is good news for destinations. It means what you may not be able to earn on premium pricing, you might be able to make up on volume. The only trick is you got to be able to accommodate those large groups. So your homework, if you are a destination or an attraction looking to grow your student travel business, is to make sure that you do the work to accommodate those larger groups. Figure out in advance how you're going to handle 50, 100, 150 kids, and then make sure you can deliver on that promise so that when a group comes to visit you, they have a great experience. Wonderful insights there from Gaurav Namit. Well, earlier in the episode, we talked a little bit about eating on the road and one of the ways that that can work for tour groups. And if you have ever met me, you might know that I almost always have my next meal on my mind. And the conversation about box lunches got me to thinking about the way we handle meals in general in the group tour industry. Specifically, I started to wonder whether it's time to rethink the traditional group packaged menu. And that is the topic of today's Hot Minute. Yeah, that's right. The Hot Minute is the portion of the show where I take 60 seconds to give you my unfiltered views on an issue that impacts tourism every day. And today I'm asking the question, is it time to rethink the tour menu? So let's put 60 seconds on the clock and get into it. I understand why many travel planners like limited restaurant menus. They make it quick, easy, and affordable to feed groups. But as a matter of industry standards, I think we need to reconsider the tour menu. You see, many younger travelers highly value restaurant experiences, and they'll often research the restaurants on your itinerary before your trip begins. So if they get excited about trying a certain dish, they're going to be disappointed when you tell them they can't have it. If you serve younger travelers or would like to broaden your customer base, you need to find ways to give them more culinary options. Now, this might cost more and it might take longer, but slower, more memorable meals are something younger travelers are willing to pay for. So if you're happy with the same old customer, then keep feeding them the same old meals. But if you want to revitalize your trips or your business, ditching the tour menu might be just the place to start. Well, that's the Hot Minute. That's how I see things anyway. As always, of course, you're welcome to disagree with me, and we can still be friends. And hey, whether you agree or disagree, we would love to hear from you. You can send me your thoughts, questions, or the favorite restaurant item you didn't get to try on a tour to podcast@grouptravelleader.com. I read every email that comes into that address. I really love hearing from you. And hey, you never know. Your ideas might just be the topic of the next Hot Minute. And while you're in the mood to give us some feedback, would you do me a big favor? Would you go to your favorite podcast player? And if you're not already following Gather and Go, then hit that subscribe button. And while you're in there, if you would give us a rating and leave us a review, that would be a big help. And I am so thankful to everyone who has done that so far. My thanks as well to Gaurav Namit for joining us today. On the next episode, I'm going to bring you an inspiring conversation with David Jackson of the Green Book Institute. We're going to talk about honoring Black travel pioneers and how we can learn from their stories to inform the way we do cultural travel today. Until then, though, remember this. At the end of the day, we're all on this trip together, so let's make it a good one. See you next time on Gather and Go. Gather and Go is hosted and executive produced by me, Brian Jewell. Our publisher is Mac Lacey. Danya Simmons is our creative director. Ashley Ricks is our circulation manager and graphic designer. Our sales team is Kyle Anderson and Talisa Reck. To advertise on the podcast, call Talisa at 859-253-0455. Gather and Go is a production of the Group Travel Leader. For more information about our magazines, podcasts, and events, visit us online at grouptravelleader.com. This episode was sponsored by Visit Atlantic City. This vibrant city awaits your arrival, and the knowledgeable staff is on hand to assist you with everything you need to make your group visit a success. Learn more at visitatlanticcity.com.